Around 60 million containers like these were shipped around the world's oceans last year, filled with electronics or tennis shoes or furniture. But new tariffs and trade barriers are threatening free trade, according to Christine Lagarde at the spring conference of the International Monetary Fund.
So, we need to better address unfair trade practices and distortions in the system, including through a WTO system reform. And we need to avoid self-inflicted wounds, including tariffs and other barriers.
And those barriers are having a real effect on trade. The IMF expects the world economic growth rate to decline this year to 3.3%. Lagarde also warned that developing countries are not benefiting from growth in industrial nations to the same extent they have in the past.
To talk more about the challenge for the world economy, I welcome to the studio Ferdinand Fichtner. He is a professor for macroeconomics at Berlin's University for Applied Sciences. Welcome to the program, Ferdinand. Are you worried by the IMF's rather pessimistic view of the world economy?
It doesn't worry me more than anything we've seen over the last few months. We've seen a pronounced slowdown over the course of 2018, and this continues into 2019. To be frank, I'm not sure the IMF is actually pessimistic, because the IMF also sees an acceleration of world growth in 2020, which is not necessarily something we can expect given all the risks that are associated with the current economic situation.
Should political leaders deal with that, or just run the economy, let it run its course? Well,
the IMF has argued that where fiscal space is available, policymakers should actually take action and address the economic slowdown. If you think about the German economic situation, for example, and the fiscal situation, there certainly is some leeway for growth stimulus by the government. So in essence, I would say that there is a good reason now to act on this situation, especially because we have structural long-run problems in Germany which call for higher fiscal expenditures anyway. If you think about the public investment situation, for example, there is good reason to invest, for the state to invest more anyway. So it's a good situation to do it exactly right now, because we have this economic slowdown, and it makes sense to do these programs in this situation.
Now, on that note, IMF Chief Lagarde has called on major players like China, like Germany, to take short-term action to address this slowing growth. Do you think Berlin will heed the call here?
I'm not so sure. Even the new finance minister, not so new anymore, but even the SPD finance minister sticks to the black zero, which means that basically the government does not want any new debt to incur. So in a way, I'm a bit skeptical. There has been agreement about new expenditures, but those go mainly into the pension system and other things. So I'm not so sure that this is actually happening.
Let's look at the big picture here. I mean, the two big stumbling blocks that the IMF is talking about is Brexit and the trade conflict between the US and China. I mean, Brexit will be resolved in some issue at some point, we all hope. The talks between China and the US seem to make progress. It looks like these two big threats could be, gotten out of the way in the future.
Right, they could, and this is actually what the IMF assumes in its projection, but they could also worsen. If you think about the Brexit situation, we're expecting a solution for the situation for months by now, and it's not happening. And all the uncertainty that is associated with this situation, it's not what damages the world economy is not so much the actual Brexit or the actual introduction of tariffs. What damages the world economy is the uncertainty associated with the current situation of negotiations, etc. And as long as those negotiations persist, we have a deceleration of growth, and this is what is happening. But the IMF is optimistic. They are expecting that solutions to both those problems will take place in the course of 2019, and that is what they take as a reason for the acceleration in 2020.
I have one last question. David Malpass made his first appearance as the head of the World Bank yesterday. He said the fight needs to continue against climate change, not really echoing the man that nominated him, Donald Trump. What do you make of that? Briefly, if you can.
I would say what Malpass Malpass is trying to steer the World Bank in a new direction, making it probably an instrument of US economic policy as a countering maybe also the Chinese expansion in the new Silk Road debate. You have a debate about this right now. And the World Bank will play a role in this situation, I think. And obviously, the World Bank has instruments which target, for example, climate policy, and Malpass will use those instruments to address economic interests of the US abroad. And in that sense, he needs to stick to the instruments the World Bank has and will use them.
Economist Ferdinand Fichtner of Berlin's University of Applied Sciences, thank you so much for your visit here to the studio.